On August 6, 1945, an aircraft named Enola Gay cut through the blue sky over Hiroshima, Japan. Unnoticed by most residents, this plane dropped a single bomb, Little Boy. Within seconds, tens of thousands of people were dead. Another 50,000 people died in the hours, days, weeks and months after this explosion. It was the first use of an atomic bomb against the civilian population. 3 days later, on August 9th, the next bomb was dropped on the Japanese city of Nagasaki. These were also the last two uses of nuclear weapons against the civilian population. Nevertheless, nuclear weapons still exist today. There is also still fear of their use, be it in the current North Korea conflict, in the conflict between India and Pakistan, or in the relationship between Russia and the USA. What would happen in the event of such an operation? What would happen in a nuclear war? As a layman, when I hear the word atomic bomb, I often think of scenes from old movies. A huge bomb being dropped from an airplane and exploding on the ground. But the reality looks completely different. Modern atomic bombs have little in common with the bombs of World War II. These are advanced warheads that cannot simply be dropped from an aircraft, as that would be far too risky. Instead, they are transported via launch vehicles. These rockets do not fly in the sky like ordinary aircraft, but rather leave the Earth's atmosphere to orbit above before returning to the atmosphere. They can fly thousands of kilometers, and the most modern of them can reach virtually any point on Earth. Furthermore, modern atomic bombs differ in another important point. They do not explode directly on the ground, but several hundred meters above it. The explosion is caused by a physical process that leads to nuclear fission inside the bomb. This releases immense amounts of energy, causing a destructive explosion. This explosion releases a blast wave that destroys everything in its wide radius. Houses are being leveled, cars are flying through the air, and the impact on people is devastating. Immediately after the detonation, a heat wave follows with temperatures of several thousand degrees Celsius. Surviving near the explosion site is almost impossible. But things also become critical outside the immediate zone. A short time after the detonation, fallout begins, a type of radioactive fallout that spreads over a large area. Radioactive material rains down from the sky, which, combined with the radioactivity released during the explosion, is extremely hostile to life. It is obvious, in a place where an atomic bomb explodes, nothing remains as it once was. The same principle also applies to hydrogen bombs, in which nuclear fusion does not occur. These are considered even more devastating and dangerous than atomic bombs. It is no exaggeration to say that the use of a nuclear bomb or nuclear weapons in general would be the worst thing that could happen to the people in an affected area. This is also because the effectiveness of nuclear weapons has increased significantly in recent decades. For comparison, the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima in 1945 had an explosive power of around 13,000 tons of TNT. Modern weapons have an explosive power of around 300,000 tons of TNT, i.e. 23 times as much. Despite some international disarmament agreements, a significant number of these weapons still exist. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute estimates that there are around 15,000 nuclear weapons worldwide, of which 14,000 are in the hands of Russia and the USA alone. To get an idea of the destructive power of modern nuclear weapons, the website Nukemap by nuclear researcher Alex Wellerstein offers a good opportunity. There you can choose any location on Earth, select a bomb, and let it explode virtually over that location. This would lead to around 2.7 million deaths in Berlin, 7 million deaths in Moscow, and even 8 million deaths in New York. These figures are only approximations, and it is likely that the actual number of victims would be even higher. It is reassuring to know that the use of nuclear weapons is not as easy as it might seem at first glance. No nuclear power in the world can simply send launchers with nuclear warheads and attack another country. This is not least because such an act requires a certain amount of preparation time, which could possibly be noticed. There are already measures in place to prevent such missiles from being fired on the ground, although countries, of course, do not disclose their strategies. There are sophisticated missile defense systems, such as interceptor shields used by Russia, the USA, and other nuclear powers. These systems can at least intercept small or medium-sized launchers. However, for larger missiles, it is unclear how effective these defenses would be. Nevertheless, conflict researchers assume that Russia, the USA, and China in particular would not use their nuclear weapons lightly. These nations use them primarily as a deterrent. However, the situation could be different for smaller nuclear powers. India and Pakistan, for example, are often mentioned in connection with regional conflicts, as are the conflicts in Korea and Israel. Speculation about the consequences of using nuclear weapons in a regional conflict is, of course, abundant. And there is much uncertainty about how such a situation would actually play out. Suppose the conflict with North Korea escalates, and North Korea decides to send a nuclear-capable launch vehicle towards the United States, Japan, or South Korea. What would happen then? It is likely that Japan, the United States, or both together would attempt to intercept this missile and respond immediately. The consequences would be devastating. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people would die in North Korea and beyond. The conflict could potentially expand further, depending on the reactions of China and Russia. This could potentially be the first step towards a Third World War. But what would be the immediate consequences for each individual in this world? This was also the question that posed researchers at Rutgers University in New Jersey, USA. Some time ago they continued model experiments that began in the early 1980s. Using modern computer simulations, they came to a dramatic conclusion. They imagined a conflict between India and Pakistan in which around 100 nuclear bombs would explode. Their calculations showed that this would result in a massive release of ash and dust into Earth's atmosphere, about 5 million tons of soot. This soot would severely impact solar radiation, which could result in a significant drop in temperature of up to 10% and reduced precipitation around the world for approximately 10 years. The entire ecosystem would become unbalanced. Crops would fail worldwide, and entire areas of land would become uninhabitable. The effects would be devastating. Around 2 billion people would be at immediate risk of starvation. Food prices would skyrocket, and bread could become 10 times more expensive. In addition to the serious ecological impacts that would be felt by generations after us, there would also be significant economic consequences. It is obvious. When entire countries fail to produce food, food becomes scarcer all over the world. Added to this is the risk of nuclear contamination and the flow of refugees worldwide that would arise. The prices on the stock exchanges would collapse, and a global economic crisis with unforeseeable consequences would result. Depending on where this nuclear conflict takes place, it would also impact areas that you might not immediately think of. Let's look at the conflict in Korea, for example. Important components for computers are manufactured in southern Korea and Japan. If these production facilities fail, it would cause a serious problem. The communications industry could be affected, as satellites could fail due to the soot. Planes might have to be grounded for months or even years, which would also have serious consequences for the entire world. And we are only talking about regional conflicts. The consequences of a global nuclear conflict would be far more devastating and serious. If there actually is a nuclear war between Russia and the USA, China and the USA, or Russia and China, then we probably don't have to worry about what would happen afterwards. It is likely that none of us would exist anymore. However, there are people who think about such a scenario. Becky, Alexis, Martin, and Thomas Davies, two scientists, dealt with exactly this in an article for the British newspaper The Guardian. What happens in the event of a global nuclear war? Where would you be safest? They concluded that Antarctica and Easter Island were the safest places, but at the same time they emphasized that survival in these places would be extremely unlikely, and that one would gain nothing from surviving nuclear war. No matter where, how, and to what extent nuclear weapons were used, it would always have dramatic consequences for the entire Earth, humanity, and all living beings. What do you think about nuclear weapons? Are they unnecessary and a danger to everyone, or do you consider them a necessary deterrent, as the so-called Cold War showed?